We hear the story constantly. India is rising rapidly as a global tech hub, exporting code, software, and services to the rest of the world. This feeds into a very specific political promise known as leapfrogging, the idea that a developing nation can skip the grimy, smokestack industrial phase and jump straight into a clean, modern information economy. Look at the actual labor data, and that high-tech utopia completely fractures. The vast majority of the Indian workforce isn't writing software. They are trapped doing backbreaking, low-yield subsistence farming. You see the contradictions everywhere. The state reports a massive national energy surplus, yet millions of citizens face daily energy poverty, and localized blackouts routinely paralyze manufacturing. Skipping steps sounds great in a campaign speech, but historically and economically, leaping straight from agriculture into the information age is an anthropological impossibility. To understand why a nation can't just buy its way into the future, we have to look at how European countries actually transitioned into the information age. This map of 19th century Italy tracks capital flow after unification. It shows a massive transfer of agricultural wealth moving out of the originally prosperous south and channeling directly into the poorer north to fund heavy industrialization. The northern regions used that extracted capital to build an industrial base, successfully transitioning into a highly productive information economy because the state strictly enforced the rule of law. Down south, despite having the initial wealth, the transition stalled entirely. Endemic judicial corruption and mafia control meant the state never secured a monopoly on violence, leaving the region economically paralyzed. You see the exact same pattern in Belgium. The French-speaking southern regions held all the heavy industry and coal wealth for decades. But it was the northern Flemish areas that established strict rule of law and successfully made the jump to dominating the modern information economy. The data proves a strict historical rule. Without a functioning state that enforces the law and protects capital, no amount of money or technology will buy a nation's entry into the information age. Which brings us back to modern India. The state simply does not hold a monopoly on violence. This systemic failure explains the energy paradox. The raw power generation exists, but private operators refuse to invest billions in building out the grid to deliver it. The mechanics of this failure happen right out in the open. Entire neighborhoods openly siphon electricity off the local grid, and the utility companies cannot force them to pay. The police cannot make arrests because local politicians actively shield the thieves in exchange for votes, rendering law enforcement entirely powerless. If basic property rights and contracts cannot be enforced at the local street level, no rational entity will risk the capital required to build heavy industry. Even if the capital arrived, true industrialization is not a peaceful transition. It is a vicious, painful process of massive wealth extraction, forced human migration, and deep social trauma. Look at the early British industrial period, or the strict regimes of Meiji Japan and South Korea. They successfully built an industrial base by pushing their populations through grueling labor and severe societal upheaval. A massive democracy operates on a completely different incentive structure. Political survival depends on handing out subsidies and shielding the public from bad news. Any democratically elected leader who attempts to enforce the severe pain required to spark an industrial revolution will simply not survive the electoral backlash. The democratic system acts as a necessary pressure valve against public anger, but that same design makes it practically incapable of executing ruthless economic reform. By failing to build an industrial bridge, the country is left without an exit strategy. There are no factory jobs to absorb the agricultural workforce. This diagram shows the direct economic consequence. Over generations, a single-family farm repeatedly fractures and subdivides into microscopic plots of land. Millions of farmers are trapped doing pure subsistence farming, unable to scale or generate profit. Because there is no industrial-grade infrastructure or cold chain logistics network to transport goods, highly valuable crops often just rot in the fields before they reach a market. A state cannot generate foundational wealth when half its population remains locked in an unsustainable pre-industrial trap. When the state fails to generate wealth, it starves its own institutions, resulting in a crippling nationwide human capital deficit. Take a top-tier PhD researcher at a premier institute tasked with investigating complex geopolitical threats. The state might provide them a total grant of just 40,000 rupees to fund their entire field thesis. That guarantees poor strategic data. This underfunded educational pipeline starves the diplomatic corps. Without the hyper-specialized on-the-ground training required in the modern world, an overstretched staff is forced to operate almost entirely blind. You cannot build a globally dominant 21st century superpower on top of a volatile 2nd century agricultural foundation. Until leadership is willing to enforce the absolute rule of law and endure the agonizing pain of true industrial development, skipping straight to a high-tech future will remain a dangerous political fantasy.